Right, so hello again to everyone, and today we're looking at academic task 1 again, and we're doing processes. Today's process is on stages in different locations. Last process demo lesson that we had was kind of about structures, and within those there was water moving about, so a lot of the language that you needed to use was active, so like the water comes through here, the water returns to the river, the water does this and that, so a lot of active language. Whereas the ones that we're looking at today, it's not that important that they're in different locations, but it's that there are people carrying out the actions. So you need a lot more passive language in these ones than you did in the previous ones. And the passive language is basically just saying that this happens to the product, as opposed to the person does this thing to the product. The essay is about the product, or is about the thing that's being processed. So we just use passive to focus on that. So the fact that it's called stages in different locations isn't really important. That's more just a reference for when I put the link into the module, so that we can kind of differentiate between the different ones. So that's the question. It's a little bit blurred, but I think you can see clearly enough. So I'll just go through in case it's not that clear if you have slow internet. So the first one here then is cows grazing. Second one, milking machine twice a day. Next is refrigeration storage, followed by milk tanker daily delivery to dairy. Then the dairy, and we have two arrows coming out of the dairy. One is just it stops at cheese, cream, and butter, and the next one is milk pasteurized and packaged. And then the last one is supermarkets and shops. So that's it in total, and you're following the same process. Maybe process isn't the best word, but it's accurate. You're doing the same thing as you did in the previous process question. So the fact that it looks different, or there are different locations or whatever, makes no difference to your answer, only to the language that you're going to use in the details paragraphs. So in analysing the question, I think what's important here is the blue arrows. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that would be the main part of the main part of the process is there. Outside of the main process is cows grazing, but there's no blue arrow connecting the cows grazing to the milking machine. So just to note that this is kind of like an outside piece of information. And also the yellow arrow here. So this is just extra information. So from the dairy to cheese, cream, and butter. This is extra information to the process. So you will need to include it in your answer. But the question is, the question statement says the diagram above shows the process of milk production. So if the main focus is on milk production, then this cheese, cream, and butter is also kind of like outside the main process, as is cows grazing. So just be careful if they haven't given you information, or if they haven't given you arrows, that this has to influence the way you answer the question. So that would be kind of like a main thing that I would pull from analysing this question, that no arrow with cows grazing and a different colour arrow here. Obviously in the real IELTS test it will be in black and white, so the different color, it won't be a different colour arrow, but you'll still see that it's outside the main process. So it's kind of like a branch, or a branch away from the main part. So just to make a note of that, and that will become more important later. So having analysed the question together, I think the best thing to do would be just pause the video and write a full answer for this question. So write your full 4 paragraphs, and then as we go through the lesson, you'll be able to determine like what things you did well and what things you could have done better, or just compare with what I'm saying. So pause the video, write a full answer to the question in front of you, and press play when you're ready. Right, so I'm going to assume that you have a full answer in front of you, and we'll just go through the 4 paragraphs together. The paraphrase is just going to focus on the question statement here. So the diagram above shows the process of milk production. So just as long as you change the structure, you can still use the same words or whatever. But something easy would be the image illustrates how milk is produced. It's very simple. You might have it a bit longer, but it doesn't need to be. So that's basically, that's all I would have, just a short sentence for my first paragraph there. Your overview will depend on the overview checklist that Chris has provided you with in the demo, or not the demo lesson, in the module. So module 11 on the process questions. So how many stages are there? I would count these as just the blue. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just because we didn't have an arrow here, I wouldn't count that as part of the process. And this one here, this is to do with cheese, cream, and butter. So this is outside the process of milk. So I would just count the main ones: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Man-made or natural. So that's a man-made. Cyclical or linear. So it's linear. It has a start and an end. The cyclical one would have an arrow back from the last stage to the first stage. What happens at the start? So at the start, the cows are milked, and at the end, milk is sold in the shops and supermarkets. Are there any raw materials? So the milk itself is the raw material, and what is produced is milk that can be sold. So basically you just put those pieces of data into a sentence, starting with overall, and that's your overview. So there, it's pretty straightforward with this one, but just to recognise that those two were outside, so I wouldn't, cows grazing and cheese, cream, and butter were outside, so I wouldn't count those. The details paragraphs then, so I like to put my details paragraphs about the same length. So what I would count is the number of stages and divide by 2. It won't always be even, but you can just kind of judge which one you would expect to be longer and work with it that way. So what I've done I've just taken 3 and 3, so the first 3 stages of the milk making process, 1, 2, 3, and again the last 3, 1, 2, 3, and then we have the extra little component in each one, so that should be pretty fair. With the cows grazing, how I would include that is part of the first stage, so you could just include it in the description of the cow. So let's say first stage here would be something like, at first the cows which have been grazing are milked by a machine twice a day. The next one, this milk is then stored at low temperatures, or this milk is stored in refrigerators or large refrigerators, or whatever way you would want to phrase that is fine. And the last one then every day the milk is brought from the refrigerators to the dairy by truck. So just be simple like that. What I've said, you might need to expand on it a little bit, but you'll have your cohesive devices between. So that would be pretty much the content of the first details paragraph. And then from here you're just going to say like from the dairy. So it doesn't actually show the individual components of what happens in the dairy. So what you might say first is I would probably go to this one. So from the dairy, you can also see that cheese, cream, and butter is produced. However, oil in the dairy, milk is pasteurized and packaged into bottles. And then finally, you just talk about the delivery and the fact that it can be sold there. So very straightforward. With this one, just because there wasn't much within the stages, you'd want to make sure that you're adding a little bit extra, that you're reaching your minimum of 150 words. So I'd say just go back and have a look at your essay and make sure that your word count is enough, because you need to expand on it a bit. That's pretty much it. So it's very, very straightforward. These ones, they're a bit easier to dissect than the ones like the structures that we looked in the previous demo lesson. Right, so then this is the question for you. As always, just write out your answers first, then type them into the comments, and I'll have a look tomorrow, and I'll make a demo, the global feedback for this demo lesson, and just go over kind of like your strengths and weaknesses, what you could have done better, and that'll be it. Okay, so thank you all for watching again, guys. Take care now.